on April 14, 1943, in the cryptographic chambers of Fleet Radio Unit Pacific at Pearl Harbor. A pencil moved methodically across paper as intercepted Japanese naval characters transformed into English text. Technical Sergeant Harold Fedena, a Nizhei translator with the Military Intelligence Service, worked with practiced precision, converting the encoded message that had originated from the Commander-in-Chief of the Combined Fleet. The decoded intelligence revealed something extraordinary. Admiral Yamamoto's detailed inspection tour schedule, complete with exact arrival times at forward bases. The message specified departure at 0600 hours Tokyo time on April 18 from Rabaul, arrival at Balale Airfield at 0800 hours Tokyo time, transport via 2 Type 1 medium bombers, an escort complement of 6 fighters. Commander William Goggins, directing FRU-PI operations, immediately grasped the message's significance. Within minutes, the decoded intelligence reached Commander Edwin Layton, Pacific Fleet Intelligence Officer. As Layton absorbed the implications, he realized that Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto, architect of Pearl Harbor, would be within range of American fighters for exactly one fleeting opportunity. What none of them understood was that this single decoded message would trigger the most audacious fighter interception in aviation history. A mission that would test the absolute limits of American technology, navigation skills, and combat capability across 600 miles of hostile Pacific Ocean. The Lockheed P-38 Lightning represented the pinnacle of American fighter design in early 1943. Twin Allison V-1710A991 engines capable of pushing the aircraft to 440 mph at 25,000 feet, connected by twin booms extending behind the engines and joined by a horizontal stabilizer spanning 52 feet. The central nacelle housed the pilot and concentrated armament, 4 Browning AM2 .50 caliber machine guns and 1 Hispano M2 20 cannon clustered in the nose, eliminating the convergence problems that plagued wing-mounted weapons. With 2 external 165-gallon drop tanks supplementing the 300-gallon internal capacity, the Lightning could achieve a combat radius exceeding 450 miles. No other American fighter in the Pacific theater could match that range, making it the only aircraft capable of reaching Yamamoto's projected flight path and returning safely. Major John William Mitchell stood in the operations dugout at Henderson Field, studying weather reports and intelligence updates with the intensity of a chess master contemplating a crucial move. Commander of the 339th Fighter Squadron, 347th Fighter Group, Mitchell had logged over 2,000 flight hours in everything from basic trainers to the latest fighters. His mind processed the tactical problem with mathematical precision. The distance from Guadalcanal to the intercept point measured 435 miles direct. But a direct flight would take them over Japanese held islands bristling with radar installations and coast watcher observation posts. The indirect route, swinging far out to sea before turning north, added 165 miles, total distance outbound 600 miles, return distance 400 miles, 1,000 miles total with fuel reserves for perhaps 7 minutes of combat at war emergency power. The mathematics were unforgiving. Standard P-38 fuel capacity totaled 60-90 gallons maximum with drop tanks. Consumption at cruise settings approximated 50 gallons per hour per engine at low altitude, increasing with altitude and power settings. Flying time available just over 5 hours and 45 minutes under ideal conditions. Required flying time for the mission 4 hours and 30 minutes minimum, assuming perfect navigation and no delays. The margin for error was essentially zero. Captain Thomas George Lanphier Jr. had studied the mission profile until every detail was burned into his memory. Son of Lieutenant Colonel Thomas Lanphier Sr., a decorated World War I aviator who had served on General Billy Mitchell's staff, the younger Lanphier possessed both tactical skills and political instincts that would shape his future. 6 feet tall, broad-shouldered. With the confident bearing of a natural leader, he had already claimed 5 aerial victories, though some were disputed. His aggressive flying style and talent for self-promotion had earned him both admirers and detractors within the squadron. First Lieutenant Rex Theodore Barber represented a different archetype of American fighter pilot. An Oregon farm boy from Culver, Oregon State College engineering student before enlisting in September 1940, Barber flew with mechanical precision and quiet competence. Where Landfair sought glory, Barber sought efficiency. His confirmed aerial victories had been achieved through careful positioning and accurate gunnery rather than spectacular aerobatics. His methodical approach to aerial combat reflected his engineering background. Every action calculated, every risk assessed, every shot carefully aimed. Aboard Mitsubishi G-Form 1 Type 1 bomber number 323 at Lockheed Airfield Rabaul, Admiral Yamamoto reviewed the inspection schedule with his staff. The Betty Bomber, as Americans called it, represented both Japanese ingenuity and compromise. Its exceptional range of 850 miles had been achieved through minimal armor protection and lack of self-sealing fuel tanks. Maximum speed of 265 at 1985 feet, cruise speed of 200 mph. The aircraft's vulnerability had earned it the nickname, Hamaki, Sagard or Type 1 lighter, among Japanese crews, a grim reference to its tendency to burst into flames when hit. Admiral Yamamoto, at 59 years old, remained Japan's most formidable strategic thinker. Born Isoroku Takano, later adopted into the Yamamoto family. He stood 5 feet 3 inches tall, but carried himself with the dignity expected of a samurai descendant. His left hand bore evidence of combat at the Battle of Tsushima Strait on May 27, 1905. The index and middle fingers lost to Russian shrapnel when a gun turret exploded aboard the armored cruiser Nishin. During his time at Harvard University from 1919 to 1921, he had hitchhiked across America, observing automobile factories in Detroit, oil refineries in Texas, aircraft manufacturing plants in California. The experience had convinced him that war with America was ultimately unwinnable, a conviction he expressed in his famous quote about running wild for 6 months before inevitable defeat. The American plan depended on signals intelligence maintaining absolute secrecy. If Japanese Naval Command suspected their codes were compromised, they would cancel Yamamoto's flight or alter the schedule. The cryptanalysis team at Station HYPO, now redesignated as Fleet Radio Unit Pacific, had been breaking JN-25 variants since before the Battle of Midway. Each decoded message risked revealing American capabilities. The decision to act on the Yamamoto intercept required approval from Admiral Chester Nimitz, Admiral William Bell, Halsey Rear Admiral Mark Mitchell, and ultimately President Franklin Roosevelt himself, who allegedly gave the simple order, "Get Yamamoto." The intercept planning fell to multiple officers working in coordination. Marine Major John Condon created the initial flight plan, calculating fuel consumption and navigation waypoints. His plan was reviewed and discarded by Mitchell, who found the airspeeds and timing estimates unsuitable for the P-38's capabilities. Mitchell recalculated everything from scratch, working with his pilots through the night to develop a plan that maximized their chances while minimizing detection risk. On April 17, 1943, the mission briefing began at 2000 hours in the packed operations tent. Rear Admiral Mark Mitchell, Commander Air Solomons, personally addressed the assembled pilots. 18 P-38s would participate in the operation. 4 aircraft designated as the Killer Flight would attack the bombers directly. 12 aircraft would provide top cover against anticipated response from Kahili Airfield's 75 fighters, and 2 additional aircraft would serve as spares in case of mechanical failures. Mitchell's navigation plan reflected both brilliance and necessity born from extensive overwater navigation experience. 5 precisely calculated legs, each designed to avoid Japanese radar coverage while accounting for wind drift and magnetic deviation. No margin existed for navigation error. A deviation of 1 degree sustained over the distance would put them miles off course with insufficient fuel to search for the target. In the pre-dawn darkness of April 18th, ground crews performed final preparations under the supervision of their crew chiefs. Fuel tanks were topped off to absolute capacity with 100-octane aviation gasoline. Ammunition belts were loaded with the prescribed mixture of ball, armor, piercing, and incendiary rounds. Drop tank attachments were checked and rechecked. A mechanical failure in a single shackle could abort an aircraft's participation or create fatal drag. At 07:25 hours local time, Mitchell's P-38s began taking off from Fighter Strip No. 2 at Henderson Field. Lieutenant McClanahan's aircraft suffered a blown tire on takeoff roll, eliminating him from the mission. Lieutenant Joe Moore's fuel transfer punked, fairing climb out, forcing him to return immediately. 16 P-38s continued the mission, 2 fewer than planned. Mitchell led the formation at exactly 30 to 50 feet above the water to avoid Japanese radar detection. Salt spray coated the windscreens within minutes, requiring frequent clearing. The pilots flew in radio silence, maintaining position through visual reference alone. Each pilot fought his own battle against monotony and fatigue during 2 hours and 5 minutes of formation flying at extreme low altitude. At 0000 hours Tokyo time, Yamamoto's 2 bomber formation departed Rabaul exactly on schedule. The Admiral wore his dress white uniform with full decorations, intending to impress the forward area troops with Imperial Navy prestige. His mood was reportedly somber. Several staff officers later testified that he seemed to have premonitions about the flight. At 0934 hours local time, Mitchell's formation reached the final navigation turn point precisely on schedule. They had been airborne for 2 hours and 9 minutes, flying entirely by dead reckoning over trackless ocean. Mitchell checked his specially synchronized Elgin watch against his calculated position. If his navigation was correct, they should turn northwest now for the intercept. Lieutenant Douglas S. Canning, flying as Mitchell's wingman, was the first to spot the target. Bogies, 11 o'clock high. He called, breaking radio silence for the first time. The range was approximately 5 miles, altitude differential 6,000 feet. 8 aircraft in perfect formation, exactly where they were supposed to be. 2 Betty bombers in echelon formation, and 6 Zero fighters in 2 flights of 3, completely unaware of the 16 P-38s climbing toward them from below and behind. Mitchell immediately ordered the drop tanks jettisoned. Skin them planks. All flights. Let's get them. 160 5-gallon tanks tumbled toward the ocean as the P-38s shed their drag-inducing burden. Engines were pushed to water emergency power, delivering 475 horsepower per engine. The Lightnings accelerated through 300 mph, climbing at maximum sustainable rate. Captain Lanphier saw the escort Zeros begin to react. They had spotted the approaching P-38s and were dropping their own belly tanks, peeling off to engage. Lanphier made an instant tactical decision that would later generate decades of controversy. Instead of continuing toward the bombers with Barber, he turned to engage the diving Zeros head-on. Lieutenant Barber maintained his course toward the bombers, now diving desperately toward the jungle canopy. The lead Betty had nosed over into a steep dive, the pilot attempting to reach treetop level, where the P-38's speed advantage would be minimized. Barber pushed his Lightning into a 45-degree dive, airspeed indicator climbing past 400 mph. At 500 yards, Barber opened fire with all weapons. 4 streams of 50 caliber bullets and 20 Nemium cannon shells converged on the bomber's right engine and wing root. The effect was instantaneous and catastrophic. The Betty's right engine exploded in orange flames, the wing spar severed by concentrated fire. The bomber rolled violently to the left, completely out of control. Barber pulled up hard to avoid collision, glimpsing the Betty's fuselage disappearing into the jungle canopy, trailing fire and debris. Japanese search parties found Admiral Yamamoto's crashed bomber the following day. The wreckage was scattered through dense jungle approximately 4 miles inland from Moa Point near the village of Aku on Bougainville. Yamamoto's body was discovered thrown clear of the main wreckage but still strapped in his aircraft seat, maintaining a dignified posture even in death, his white, gloved hand still clutching his ceremonial sword. Medical examination revealed 2 gunshot wounds. One bullet had entered below his left shoulder blade, exiting above his right eye. Another had struck his jaw. Death had been instantaneous, probably during Barber's initial firing pass. The psychological impact on the Japanese Navy was devastating beyond calculation. Yamamoto was not merely a fleet commander, but the embodiment of Japanese naval tradition and strategic thinking. His understanding of combined fleet operations was unmatched. His ability to inspire loyalty among subordinates was legendary. His realistic assessment of American capabilities had provided the only check on Japanese strategic overreach. Japanese naval intelligence immediately suspected the Americans had broken their codes. The precision of the intercept, arriving at exactly the right place and time after a 600-mile flight, seemed impossible through coincidence. But acknowledging code compromise would require admitting a catastrophic intelligence failure that could affect ongoing operations. The American reaction was initially subdued due to security concerns. If the Japanese confirmed that codes were compromised, the intelligence advantage that had proved decisive at Midway and enabled the Yamamoto mission would be lost. President Roosevelt received the news with grim satisfaction but ordered absolute secrecy. The controversy over who shot down Yamamoto began immediately upon landing and would poison relationships for decades. Captain Lanphier aggressively promoted his claim, describing performing an extreme vertical reversal and firing into the bomber from above. Lieutenant Barber's account was more modest and consistent with physical evidence, a straightforward stern chase and attack on the lead bomber. Japanese witnesses, including Zero pilot Yanagiya interviewed after the war, confirmed seeing only one P-38 attack the lead bomber. Approaching from behind and below exactly as Barber described, the angle of bullet impacts on Yamamoto's body, entering from below and behind, matched Barber's attack geometry perfectly. In 2003, after extensive analysis of Japanese records, crash site evidence, and witness testimony, historians concluded that Barber alone was responsible for shooting down Yamamoto. The mission demonstrated American technological superiority in multiple dimensions. Code-breaking provided the intelligence, long-range fighters provided the weapon, precise navigation provided the delivery system. The strategic implications of Yamamoto's death extended beyond immediate military effects. His absence removed the one Japanese leader who might have negotiated reasonable peace terms as the war turned against Japan. Yamamoto understood that Japan could not win a prolonged war against American industrial might. His successors, lacking his perspective and influence, pursued increasingly desperate strategies that prolonged the war and increased casualties on both sides. Admiral Yamamoto's death represented more than the loss of one commander. His unique understanding of American capabilities had provided Japan's only realistic strategic vision. He alone among Japanese leaders truly comprehended American industrial capacity and political will. His replacement by commanders who believed in spiritual superiority over material reality accelerated Japan's defeat. The mission demonstrated the evolution of American fighter tactics from defensive to offensive operations. Early in the war, American fighters had struggled to protect their own bombers from Japanese interception. By April 1943, American fighters were conducting complex offensive operations deep in Japanese-controlled airspace. In the final analysis, Operation Vengeance represented American warfare at its most effective superior technology, guided by precise intelligence, careful planning executed with tactical flexibility, individual excellence within coordinated team effort. The synthesis of these elements had killed Admiral Yamamoto, and, with him, Japan's best hope for negotiated peace. April 18, 1943, had dawned with 18 American pilots preparing for an impossible mission. It ended with Admiral Isoroku Yamamoto dead in the Bougainville jungle, Japan's naval strategy in ruins, and American victory in the Pacific increasingly inevitable. The longest fighter intercept mission in history had achieved its objective through brilliant planning, superior technology, exceptional flying skills, and extraordinary luck.